In this video, I'm going to tell you about the healing power of terrain and how it can help your hobby motivation. One of the toughest parts of this wargaming hobby, and I'm talking about the painting and the building and the etc. side as opposed to the playing side, but the hobby portion of the hobby, if that makes any sense to you, I don't know. The hardest part is probably keeping motivated to keeping on. You know what I mean? There are times when you're at work and you're like, man, I can't wait to get home and I'm going to just start painting. I'm going to paint all night until I fall asleep on my desk. And there are times that you do. You come home, you're super energized and you do it and you're really excited about it and that's great. And then there are other times then you're excited to do it and you come home and you don't. Life gets in the way. You know, you got kids, you got family, you got chores, you got mowing the lawn, whatever. You just got tired is what you got. And that happens too. Other times you're just not even motivated at all. You're maybe, let's say, at your day job or whatever you're doing. And you're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do any hobby tonight. I'm just not feeling it. And there's a lot of things that can cause that. Sometimes you're just not interested in focusing that much on something specifically so small. Miniatures are, they're miniature. It's kind of what they're called. And there's times when you're just like, I just am not prepared to sit here and just look at this stuff for that, just for like 2 hours. I just can't work on something small like that. And then you also look at how you have 30 of those guys or 40 of those spooky ghosts or skeletons or lizard people or robots or whatever. And you've got so many of them you got to get done. And you're just like, I can work on this one and then work on the next one and I just don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. So, what do you do? Got to be honest, I don't know what you do, but what I do generally is start working on terrain. The thing about terrain is that you're not focusing on something incredibly tiny. You're not focusing on little tiny stuff. You're focusing on, frankly, something that's generally a bit bigger. You're working on a bigger project. You're not sitting there and usually painting all the tiny little details. Frequently, you're doing a lot of dry brush or airbrush or rattle can or something like that. And it gets done quicker too. You get done with a piece a little bit more quickly than you do get done with like a whole unit of models because you're not spending as much time on that stuff and you're getting a bigger area finished as well. That's the way I look at it. You can look at it and go, well, it took me a very long time to paint this little guy, but look how it didn't take me nearly as long to paint this whole cool thing. You know what I mean? And that kind of stuff can really help in getting your motivation going and get some stuff done so you've got a nice looking table and hopefully kind of kickstart things and start pushing you back into painting miniatures. So hopefully to help motivate you to paint some terrain, or build some terrain, whichever, which will hopefully then maybe, help you to actually get back into painting miniatures. I thought I would show you some of the terrain projects that I've gotten done recently, some that are not done, that are in progress, and I just kind of talk about them real quick and that kind of stuff. Now, I showed this one off just a moment ago. This one here is, it's kind of a mixture of pieces that I didn't make and I kind of put it all together. That's the thing that I like about terrain sometimes is I can take this big cool plinth, I don't know what you would call this. It's a big monument type thing. It's from a company called Mammoth Miniatures over in the UK, and I really liked it when I saw it. It was bright green when I first bought it, and I've obviously painted it and whatnot. And then these cool pillars are from WizKids, a lot of that pre-primed stuff that you can get from WizKids, a lot of D&D things. They also have little terrain bits as well. So I wanted to make a piece of area terrain for Rain in Hell, the game that Vincent and I designed. And I wanted to use something cool and have like a really cool shriney kind of monument thing. We've got some skulls up here on the top that you can see that I added in. There's some cool demon skulls down here. There's just a lot of extra stuff, little rocks and all kinds of things like that. It's just a piece of MDF on the bottom that I cut irregularly and then just put a bunch of stuff in there, covered it all with texture stuff, painted it, and I don't know, I like it. It turned out really, really well. And it was a fun little project. Didn't take me too long, just on and off over the course of a weekend, and neat looking thing for your piece of your terrain on your table. Now moving into the world of sci-fi, we've got some 3D printed stuff here from a website called Terrain Machine. Terrain Machine is cool because you can go there and design what you want. They've got a lot of different packs of different like this wall or this wall, but then you can move the door someplace else and then move the ladder someplace else, and just all these different little parts. And you can design your own buildings and then pay for the STL. Then you get the STL, and either you or a friend of mine in this situation, prints these. And again, this is just regular FDM, not resin. And then you can print them and then paint them. I spray them usually with a good filler primer, like a Rust-Oleum filler primer, to kind of help fill in some of the little striations and stuff like that. Honestly, striations with sci-fi stuff doesn't bother me too much. I cut out this little stencil so I could have a little bit of graffiti on there. I got this one too. This one needs to be finished yet because we've got some signage here that needs to be filled in. I mean, we wouldn't be a good marketer if you didn't have your signage filled in. But you can add all these parts, and then I weather them a lot with my airbrush using a lot of contrast paints and speed paints from the Army Painter, stuff like that. A bunch of these are relatively easy to get designed and then printed, and then you can make a full table full of cool stuff for games like Stargrave or Planet 28 or Space Weirdos or, all kinds of stuff. This is the first ever ruin that I ever scratch built myself. It is just 2 pieces of foam core with your quintessential, windows cut out. I actually put a little bit of plastic rod at the bottom of each of them to give them a little bit more interest. Then I did this little thing here, just because so many of these buildings that when you first get into building, stuff like this, these corner ruins, which are, very well known amongst the world of 40K. Every building eventually falls down but leaves up a corner. That's how it works. If it's just flat, it's kind of dull. You know what I mean? So a little bit of, just a little bit of extra, a little bit of embellishment, something on these things here, this thing. I even put some plastic on the corner to kind of help hide the join a little bit. Some detail up here. And on the insides, I got some cool posters that I printed out and then just sort of Mod Podged on there. I think this is honestly the first time I ever airbrushed anything as well. Made this with a friend of mine. And it's seen better days. It's got some spots I should probably touch up and everything like that. But even something like this is something that you can have started and then set aside once you get your motivation back and start working on something. And then you can decide, okay, my motivation to paint these little tiny people is flagging. I'm back over here. I'm going to do some airbrush or some washes, or I'm going to put on some embellishment, stuff like that. Scratch building terrain is definitely something, if you've never tried it before, you should definitely give it a try because it's a lot of fun. You get to do kind of exactly what you want, and you can really, I think, expand your creativity by doing it. Counterpoint, it's always good to have a couple of pieces of store-bought terrain laying around to work on for projects. Here is a piece from our friends over at Games Workshop. I primed it black after building it, and then I sprayed it silver a bunch, kind of from above, a bit of a zenithal thing over the top. And then, and I haven't touched it in a while, it's just now taking colors of contrast and just, you can kind of see here, I've started to color this here, but I haven't colored anything else yet. I'm going to be able to work on these bits and these parts, leave some stuff silver because that's kind of the base color, but then go in and color a lot of other things. May even throw some opaque colors over it if I don't want a metallic sheen behind that contrast or speed paint stuff. But having a piece like this, again, just something within arm's reach, you can just grab off the shelf when you're like, nah, or maybe even this while something's drying. Sometimes even just be like, this is going to take forever for that base to dry because I've slopped a lot of wash on it. Cool. I'm going to go in and just do a little bit of dry brushing, edge highlighting, that kind of stuff. To be fair, I wouldn't put too much edge highlighting on your terrain. Edge highlighting is something that you would spend time usually on your models, unless you're really bored or something like that, or you really just need to have something to do when you're like watching Netflix or whatever. Edge highlighting on terrain, in my opinion, is putting a little bit too much detail in your terrain because you really want your detail to be on your miniatures. I have this idea for this project, and this is as far as it is right now, but I brought it from home so I could kind of show you what it is. So this is a cool vehicle from Mantic, from their Warpath game. And when I first saw a picture of it somewhere, I think on Twitter, I was like, it just struck me as I'm like, I could make a cool piece of terrain out of that. So I bought it and then built it, and it's supposed to be on a stand and all that kind of stuff. And you use it in the game. I'm going to be using it basically as something that's going to be sitting kind of cocked like this, right? So you're going to have this piece of terrain. This thing will be cocked up. You're going to have a bunch of crates and things like that around it. Like a person has been trying to fix this thing, but it's going to be at an angle, going to glue it down. And then it's just going to be a piece that sits in a sci-fi situation, some sort of game like that, and is just blocking terrain. But it'll be interesting. It'll look like, this is a kind of like when you see someone working on a boat and it's on a beach for some reason, and it's been there for a long time. Think of like the end of Shawshank Redemption. This is like Shawshank Redemption, basically. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, this is a plan for a little bit more future, Adam, but I got at least these parts started. I got this stuff cut out, and very possibly this is a winter project for me. Here's a couple of pieces that I worked on just recently, doing some priming when it was one of those perfect priming days, when it's not too hot, not too windy, not too humid. I use a lot of rattle can when I'm priming terrain because it sticks to plastic and stuff like that a little bit better than airbrush does. Airbrush works pretty well, and very frequently my next step after the rattle can prime is going to be airbrush, but this is for a game called The Last War, which is a World War I kind of alternate history sort of game. The same folks that made Forbidden Psalm, which I've talked about before. So I've got these resin pieces from armor casts, good old armor casts. I've had them around literally for 2 decades, easy. They've been floating around in my collection of stuff, and I just recently decided, you know what, I'm going to use them. So I cut out this piece of MDF, and I laid down these pieces here, and then these are just coffee stirrers. I wanted to make it look like it's a busted up, like something like a bomb went off and the flooring in here was all broken. It's just a bunch of little skinny wooden coffee stirrers that I glued down one at a time, which was a little bit tedious, but it's going to look really cool when it's done. Another piece I rattle canned that same day was this thing. This is a weird, I hope that doesn't freak anybody out, but I bet it might. I apologize. This is a weird 3D printed thing that I got at Adepticon, 2016, 2017. It's been rolling around in the basement for a while. And I'm thinking now that I've got this texture on it, that I've got the primer on it, I actually might go back and texture it and put in something else, maybe some Monument Hobbies texture, paint, or something. It looks a little too 3D printy to me, and I know that after I'm painting it, it will look even a little bit more so. So I think I need to do a little bit more work to it. But priming it at least is kind of step one. Lastly, a couple pieces from Reaper. These are from Reaper Bones, and I'm going to show you the right way and the wrong way, I think, to do things. So this is the right way. This is a great piece, actually sculpted by Bobby Jackson. I really like everything he does for Reaper. And there was supposed to be a big statue here, but I kind of was like, I don't want to have that statue there. So more some skulls and stuff like that. But this is a great piece made out of that Reaper Bones material, which you have to be careful with a little bit because it doesn't take primer very well. So, and also it has a tendency sometimes to start to curl over time. So I glued it to this piece again of MDF, and that is nice and flat. It does not seem to have warped at all, which is great. Again, used some JB Weld to glue it on there. Texture around the edges, did a little bit of extra work, just painted it up, and a lot of dry brushing and stuff like that. It worked out real well. Here's another piece, also from Reaper Bones. I don't know who sculpted this one. I like the sculpt, but I originally rattle canned it to prime it, and then it was sticky for 3 months. And then eventually I coated it with enough layers of brush-on matte varnish that it stopped being sticky, and then I primed it again, but with my airbrush. I should have primed it with my airbrush right from the get or brushed on something. And it's a cool piece, don't get me wrong, but it's also kind of warped now. Like it sticks up around the edges in places because it's bendable. It's a bendy, it's Reaper Bones. So if I was to do this again, I would have started by basically cutting a piece of MDF, gluing it to this, and then working on it from there. And again, at any time, you can pick these pieces up and just do some dry brushing or do some washes or do a little bit of this, do a little bit of that, and hopefully get your motivation moving again. So as I said, I'm hoping that me showing you some of the projects that I've done in the past, ones I've got in progress right now, and ones that I hope to get done in the future, I hope this has helped to motivate you to work on some terrain, especially when you're not interested in working on miniatures. Forward momentum in this hobby, whether it's on terrain, whether it's on list building, whether it's on painting your actual miniatures, whether it's just cleaning your hobby desk, at any time, something like that can help you move into the next phase. I'm just not feeling it tonight. Well, maybe I'll clean my hobby desk. Okay, cool. Maybe then you start working on some terrain once you got a little bit more space. And then after that, you go, you know what? I really want to work on glazing a tiny little person's face for 2 hours. That's possible. I'm not into glazing faces like that, but I do like to paint miniatures. And very frequently, when I'm not interested in painting miniatures, painting terrain is the next best thing. And it brings me back around. If this was helpful, I hope it was, click the like button down below. I'd appreciate it. It really does help the channel. It doesn't cost nothing. If you're interested as well, you could subscribe. That'd be cool. Thanks for watching.